Ms. Malliotakis.
Will the sponsor yield, please?
Mr. Farrell will yield.
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question. Well, not quick question. Actually, I have a few quick questions. But how many bond caps are we raising within this particular budget bill?
How many?
Bond caps are we raising within this particular budget bill?
We have an answer. There is an increase of $8.7 billion in state bond caps over the prior year.
And how many caps is it? Is that, I think the number I calculated was 21. Is that correct?
5 caps over the governor.
So 21.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other day we had paid our debt service, and it showed that currently we have a debt of approximately $55 billion. So this $8.7 billion is now would bring that new number to what?
It'll be the same. Oh, this is just an authorization to borrow.
Got it. Understood. Now, right now the current cap is $47 billion, our debt limit.
I don't have those papers with us.
And I believe that we have about, if we were to issue this $8.7 billion, we would have about $2.9 billion remaining, which means we're getting very close to the cap.
Yeah, we are getting close. We'll acknowledge that.
Okay. And so how is this sustainable if we're getting close and we issued, and by the way, most of this would not be voter approved, right?
Yeah.
And so we did have the voters approve the $2 billion in the Smart Bonds Act, which they said they do want to see us invest. They do want to see us issue debt to invest in technology for our classrooms. We can't do that because we're approaching this cap, and as of right now, we're actually headed to maybe meet this cap in a couple of years, correct?
Yeah, well, you'll find the cap will get smaller as we go, and I think at 2020, I think it hits a number, and at that point, it then begins to go back out.
Okay. On page 80 of this budget, line 26, we are authorizing an increase to the MTA bond cap from $37 billion to $55 billion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Didn't we, if my memory serves me correctly, didn't we just increase the MTA's bond cap back in 2012? I voted against it, but you went ahead and did it anyway.
Yes, we did.
Okay. And that went from, what, 34 to 37 billion?
No. 41 to 55?
So in 2012, we increased it from 34 to 37, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not up on, we don't have the papers for this discuss.
Okay, well,
but it does go up. It's up to about 50 something.
Okay, so I remember because I voted against it. It was 34 to 37 billion that we increased it. Right now, the MTA's current debt is $36.6 billion, which means we're very close to meeting that cap. So right now, what we're doing is we're authorizing the MTA to be allowed to issue up to $55 billion, which I find very troubling, don't you?
No.
Why not?
Because we talked earlier about the third track for the people that come in from Long Island. That's very important. The Second Avenue subway, which we promised in 1929, and the New York City promised in 1929 to build, and they're not. So there are things that we allow them to do, and yes, they're a very good bond. So I don't worry about it having any problems.
Well, I think we should be worried about it because we're authorizing an agency to issue $55 billion in debt when the entire state's debt limit and cap is only $47 billion. So how are we allowing one agency to issue $55 billion more than what the entire state of New York did?
Because, as I said before, there are things we need done everywhere.
Okay. Okay, on the bill, please.
On the bill, Mr. Malliotakis.
This bill is, I think, what we would call a big ugly. There's a lot in here, and I think at the end of the day, when we look at the amount of debt that's being issued, not only with what I mentioned earlier, the $8.7 billion authorization to increase debt caps all over the place, but more importantly, the MTA issue. This is really an April Fool's Day joke on the taxpayers of the state of New York. To allow a state agency as dysfunctional and mismanaged as the MTA to go ahead and issue up to $55 billion on its own, which is more than what the entire state of New York can issue, which our cap is $47 billion, I think is very, it's just unbelievable. It's really irresponsible on our part. Especially, and I've warned of this back in 2012 when we did it from 34 to 37. I said it was not a good idea. Sure enough, the MTA continues to meet it, and now we're going to say they can go up to $55 billion. They're never going to get out of this. When are we ever going to fix this MTA if we continue to kick the can down the road with all these projects? The Long Island East Side Access Project, to show you how mismanaged they are and why we shouldn't be allowing them to issue more debt. It's been pushed back 4 times in the last 10 years. It is now scheduled to be completed in 2021, 10 years after it was supposed to be, and $6 billion overrun in costs. The MTA, we all know it here, is a black hole. The money goes there and we don't know what happens to it, and as a result, all of us come in this room and we complain that our fares rise, our tolls rise, that services are being cut, and yet we continue to allow the MTA to get away with this and do this. And so I think this is just really unbelievable that we're allowing this. And the response I got from the chairman that it's okay, I think that's something that everyone in the state of New York should be concerned about. While I'm on this bill, I'm going to also talk about this minimum wage increase, because I think to have 3 different wages for 3 different regions in the state is pretty stupid, to be honest. We look at California and what they're doing. They put in this minimum wage to go in effect for 2022. So, of course, our governor wants to always compete with everyone. We're going to do it now for 2021. I'll tell you what else we're in competition with California for. And it goes back to what I originally started this conversation on, debt. We are actually competing with California to be the most indebted state in the nation. These are not titles that we should be looking for. I think, in October, I went with my colleague, Ms. Tenney. We went to visit other parts of the state. As a New York City member, I thought it was important for me to see other areas of the state of New York, see a farm, see a winery, see the different aspects of life that we are voting on every day in this chamber. And I recommend to my colleagues that you do the same, because what we're voting on today is going to impact the entire state of New York. And when I look at areas that I visited, like, for instance, we had Clarkshire Farms that we went to. We went to a dairy farm in Chautauqua. Clarkshire happens to be in Herkimer County. Cuba, New York. If our governor spent time in Cuba, New York, instead of coddling communists in Havana, Cuba, he would have an idea of the impact that this proposal would have on the entire state of New York. In my area, in Brooklyn, right outside my district, we have Lilac Chocolates. They told me today that they're going to take, what they've been doing is they have a handmade chocolate operation. They're not going to have that anymore after this minimum wage passes. They've already ordered a $25,000 machine that's going to automatically create their chocolates. And so we are going to see jobs be impacted by this. We are going to see economies be impacted by this. We are going to see small businesses closed and big box stores replace them. And you know what happens when you go to the CVS instead of the local pharmacy, right? You're checking out and you're swiping your stuff at a kiosk, at a machine, because they're eliminating jobs. We're going to go to McDonald's. We're going to order out cheeseburger from a kiosk. That's what's going to happen here. I think it's very unfortunate we have no exemptions, except for a very small 10 or under in New York City. But outside of that, there's no exemptions for small business for either this or the family paid leave. And I think if we truly want to get people off of minimum wage, we should be investing in vocational training. We should be investing in giving them a skill so they can make a career. We shouldn't be trying to just pigeonhole people into a minimum wage job. As someone said earlier, minimum wage is supposed to be for entry level. It's supposed to be when you first, start out in the world. I worked at the Gap for minimum wage when I was in college, and I made $5.50 an hour. So it's not something that I think we should want for people to live the rest of their lives on. We should want more for them, and we should try to help them achieve that. And lastly, since education's in here, I just want to talk a little bit that I was pleased to see that the DREAM Act wasn't in here. As I've said before, I think that it's an inappropriate use of tax dollars. And I do want to take a moment, though, to say we should be looking to invest more in tuition assistance program for our citizens and our legal residents of this state. We need to restore the tuition assistance program for our graduate students. This House eliminated it back in 2010, never restored it. That's something that we should be doing to help our middle-class families. And we should also be looking to increase the tuition assistance income eligibility threshold so more middle-class families can qualify, because the last time we did it was in the year 2000. And we haven't done it since then. It's been 16 years. We all talking about the rising costs here, right? Well, that's part of it, tuition. And so I think that we need to look at increasing the income eligibility threshold. Now, one last point I wanted to make on the minimum wage, because argument here is that the cost of everything is going up. It's true, the cost of everything is going up. But I think that we need to look at the policies that are coming out of this House, that are coming out of the City Council, that are hurting our businesses, that are increasing the cost of living. This $55 billion debt that the MTA is going to take out, that's going to increase our tolls, our fares, that's going to make it more expensive for the people of New York to live here. And then you'll come back and say, well, the cost of living is so high, we've got to increase the minimum wage again. It's a never-ending cycle. So we should be looking within ourselves of where we can cut costs and regulations for our businesses and for our residents to make New York more affordable. That's where we should be focusing on. And I will be voting against this budget, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.